welcome to episode 124 of Nothing to Say, the Fans Podcast. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of really interesting things to talk about. So much to talk about in the NBA. Most of the show is going to be revolved around the moves that happened in the NFL, but there is some NBA stuff we can get to. Just a whole bunch of craziness over the last week. It has been just one thing after another in terms of the NBA, the NFL. It's been wild. But however, in saying that, before we get to all of that, I used to read some interesting sports facts at the beginning of our show, and I had sort of fallen off of that. However, I had stumbled across one earlier today that I thought was really interesting that sort of reminded me of that segment. So I wanted to read at least two. I'm just going to read two that I found really funny. And actually, it revolves around the MLB, which we all know is actually coming back. So I guess congratulations to all of the hardcore baseball fans. You're getting your favorite sport back. So this was the one that I saw today that made me go and look up another one. So Ken Griffey Jr., who if you paid attention to baseball, you'll know who that is. Very famous baseball player, outstanding baseball player as well. Ken Griffey Jr. right now is currently the sixth highest paid player on the Reds. Keep in mind he hasn't played for them since 2008. So there you go. I saw that today, and that was pretty. I think I had heard that before, but actually hearing where he placed on the team, that was interesting. Sixth on the team. His agent really deserves to be in the Agent Hall of Fame.
They've just prorated that contract that he got from them all the way 14 years. Well, they just traded Jesse Winker and Eugenio Suarez. I can't pronounce his first name. It's so hard.
Don't ask me how to pronounce names. We know I have a
but they're probably a couple guys that were earning a little more than. How much does it say? How much Griffey's earning per year?
Yeah, it says $3.59 million
per year.
Per year.
Oh, he's living handsomely.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So I thought that one was interesting, because I just don't hear that very often. And then another one with the baseball. Keep in mind, it's a very obscure stat, but it made me laugh. So in the Mariners' 44 years of existence, they've experienced more ruptured testicles than playoff appearances. So apparently, they have had players on their team rupture more testicles than the amount of playoff appearances that they've had. Apparently, that number's 5 for the ruptured testicles. The playoff appearances are 4. What I don't know is if one player blew both balloons or if it was 5 separate players. I'm not sure.
Is it one testicle? Or is it you?
No, it's apparently 5.
If you harm both, does that count as one instance?
The specifics of the ruptured testicles, I do not have. However, the number is 5, and the playoff appearances is 4. So take it for what it's worth.
I think they might tie it this year. I think the Mariners got a good shot. As long as someone ruptures their testicle,
there you go.
Then I think they got a good shot this year.
There we go. So I wanted to start the show off with a good little laugh because that was funny. Okay, so let's jump right to the football. We have a lot to cover. One of the things that isn't as timely right now, once the episode releases, which will be Friday, we're filming this on Thursday night. One of the things that isn't necessarily as timely right now is the announcement that Tom Brady is coming back for his 23rd season. However, we haven't gotten a chance to say anything about it. So quickly, we can talk about it. Sam, what were your thoughts with Tom Brady coming back for his 23rd season, announcing that he is not done and he will be back with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
I knew it was going to happen.
Right.
I think we all knew. I think I was more shocked that he said he wasn't going to play at the initial reaction or with the initial report, then I was shocked that he was coming back. I mean, it just made so much sense. He's too big of a competitor, and he's playing too well, frankly, for him to just stop playing. It's kind of weird how it took 2 months for him to really come back on that. Like, what happened at home that really almost set him off to where he was like, and games weren't even played. Like, we didn't even cross the first game, the first week of play. Not even, he didn't even have to sit at home and watch a preseason game and be like, oh man, I really miss it. Like, it was just in the offseason that he missed that brought him back. That is nuts.
Yeah. There was an interview done with Tom Brady Sr. on Tuesday of this week, I believe. Greeny actually did the interview on his radio show, and he was asking him about, the decision that went into retiring. And I don't want to go, I can't quote it verbatim, but if you haven't heard it, I would say go back and listen to it, because he provided a lot of really interesting insight into kind of what happened with Brady, and sort of that whole thought process. Basically, what I got from it is that sort of the media almost felt like it felt like the media broke the story before Tom had made up his mind, really, and then everything sort of pushed him towards it, and I don't think he was ready to make that decision. It's kind of what I got from the interview. But go back and listen to it if you haven't heard it, because it's really interesting. Because Tom is usually he's been very cordial and friendly with the media, and he does give you a lot, but a look into that from one of his family members, it's a really cool listen. I had said on our show that I didn't think he was coming back, but I didn't say that with the assumption that it couldn't happen. With the weird retirement post, not mentioning anything about the Patriots, the sort of abruptness of it. It was just, I agreed with everybody. It all felt weird. But then in the back of my mind, I was also thinking of Tom Brady in the sense that Tom Brady, to me and to everybody, I think, doesn't feel or seem like an impulsive person. So in my mind, I was like, if he chose to do it, then I'm going to choose to believe that he's going to stay, even though all signs are kind of pointing towards the fact that he probably isn't going to. But I don't know. He's not an impulsive person. At least everything that we know, he's not an impulsive person. So I just chose to believe that he was going to stay retired. But did it come in as a surprise? No. And for me, it was sort of like, okay, cool. I'm glad he's back. But it's not a surprise. Next story, which I know feels like kind of a brush off for the best quarterback ever. But I mean, like you said, we all kind of expected that it probably wasn't over.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what this year looks like. Does it look like that farewell tour that he was really trying to avoid? Because I think it might end up naturally becoming that, because it's going to turn out like the narrative, I think, will be that this is Tom's last year.
Maybe. What if it's not? That's the thing. I mean,
but it's just weird. Like, how would he go from 1 year thinking that it's all done, and then he ends up playing 2 more years? Like, that's just
people were talking about, at least one of the questions that got brought up on ESPN was, will Tom Brady finish his career in Tampa? And there were a handful of people that said he's going to finish his career, or the fun answer would be he's going to finish his career in San Francisco. He's going to play this year and then go play a year or two in San Francisco and then retire.
Right.
So who knows? You never know.
San Francisco has got Trey Lance anyway, so it don't matter.
Right. They're going to at least the NFC Championship next year. So
he's the next Tom Brady, didn't you know?
Right. Right. Who also happens to be able to run like nobody's business.
He's like Lamar Jackson with Tom Brady's arm and accuracy.
There you go. There you go.
Not the accuracy, because we have not seen that.
Right. Right. Well, Tom Brady is back. That happened at the beginning of the week. We had to cover that. And now I'm just going to kind of rapid fire through everything that happened in sequential order, sort of from the beginning of the week to the end of this week. So one of the big things that happened was the Washington Commanders. I think that's only the second or third time I've said that on the show. Gotta remember their name. The Washington Commanders agreed to a trade for Carson Wentz He is now on the Washington Commanders. I almost said football team. I'll get to it eventually. I'll stumble at least once. Amari Cooper is now on the Browns. Mitchell Trubisky signed with the Steelers. J.C. Jackson, the cornerback who's led the NFL in interceptions since 2019, is now on the Chargers. Randy Gregory is going to Denver. Khalil Mack, by the way, also went to the Chargers.
Woo.
Then we have Chandler Jones, who signed with the Las Vegas Raiders. Von Miller signed, I think it was a 6-year, like $120 million deal with the Buffalo Bills. That was a huge contract.
Mm-hmm.
And then 6 hours ago, we learned that Allen Robinson signed with the Rams. So that was one of those, I can't believe that happened kind of moment. But potentially the biggest one just happened less than 3 hours ago, and that was Davante Adams getting traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. And in terms of that, as the Packers get a 2022 first-round pick and the 2022 second-round pick from the Raiders, which kind of feels like a steal. And then the Raiders get wide receiver Davante Adams, and it is a 5-year, $140 million contract. So that's everything that has happened over the past week. It is the AFC West versus the field. At least that's what it seems like.
In the AFC, at least.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. So just give me here. Let's start with the big one, the one that just broke, the Adams thing. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this was the move that the Raiders had to make. This is like a major arms race in the AFC West because the Chargers and the Broncos were putting so much pressure on both the Raiders and the Chiefs, the two teams that made the playoffs out of the AFC West, were really falling behind in acquiring talent, new talent to their teams. And it almost seemed like they were going to stay stagnant and the Chargers and Broncos were going to keep improving at such a fast pace. I think the Chargers offseason has been perfect.
Outstanding.
And they've had a couple, because the draft last year with Slater and the cornerback they got, I think it was Samuels in the draft, I think just worked really well, getting Derwin James back. And all the moves they made last offseason, I think worked out really well. And they've just built on that with getting a steal in Khalil Mack, who still has a lot of football left, and getting the best cornerback, maybe the best defensive player in terms of impact to a team in the free agency. Mm-hmm. And they added both of those without losing anything, really. And so I think that put so much pressure on the Raiders, and this is such a big deal that they were able to make, especially the fact that they were able to extend and really reach an agreement to extend Davante for 5 years, too, is so huge for this team. And it just goes so well with the Chandler Jones aspect as well. They were able to make the biggest splash, I think, even maybe more in terms of Russ too, like the best offensive player, the best new addition of an offensive player is going to the Raiders. Yes. And that is such a big time statement for the Raiders, as it seemed like they were losing ground in the division.
So 2 things, and I'll do the Chandler Jones and the Davante thing, since obviously this is my team. It's been well documented on this show if you've been paying attention to our show. So 1, good job by our new GM. Holy smokes. The getting Chandler Jones and Davante in the same offseason is insane, especially for a new general manager to come in and go, yeah, you know what? We're going to get Jones. We're going to get Davante. And that'll be my first moves as a GM. Way to introduce yourself to a fan base. I think we're all giving you a round of applause for that. Not to mention, the Raiders also signed, I think, like 400 players today. I was getting updates about the Raiders like all day. They signed just a ridiculous amount of players, and they were all decent players too. I didn't see a lot of negative reactions for the people that they signed. I don't need to go through the list because it's not that important. But but they signed a lot of really solid players. I think what they really did was they added a lot of depth, which they needed.
Right.
So they had a really good day, and it sort of sandwich that is it started with the Chandler Jones thing. They had all of these signings that were like, okay, yeah, so they're rebuilding the roster a little bit. They're adding some depth, and then boom, they have the Adams thing to sort of close that. And it really caps. You and I were talking about it a little like last week. I kept saying to you, I was like, dude, they're not doing anything. Like I haven't heard anything about who they want to go after. The Devontae thing to me seemed open and shut. As soon as Rodgers said that he was signing with the Packers, I sort of pushed Devontae out of my train of thought. I was like, there's no way. Because if those guys, you'd think that they would have some sort of communication with each other that I thought, and I had said initially to you guys, once this trade happened, I texted everybody in our little group chat. I said, Aaron Rodgers had a terrible week because Tom Brady came back and he loses his number one wide receiver. But I was talking to my dad, and he brought up the point that Rodgers probably knew. Like, you probably, if you're Aaron Rodgers, know that your number one wide receiver is going to leave. I don't think that was a surprise for Rodgers, and maybe it was, but there was probably some. I would imagine that there was some form of open communication between the two. And then I guess really on defense, the Chandler Jones thing, losing Yannick Ngakoue was huge. That sucked because having him on the opposite side of Max Crosby really gave Max Crosby the ability to just do what he normally does, which is just he never takes a play off. He's just a freak of nature.
Yeah.
So losing him stunk. Getting Chandler Jones, who is better than Yannick, just in terms of he's just better.
I mean,
yeah, he's just better. Yeah. It would have been nice to have all three of them. That would have been insane. But I think that would have been.
How do you fit them all?
Right, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that would have been feasible. So what you do on defense is you get a perfect pairing in those two. Just put them on opposite ends and say double whoever you want and take your chance with the other one. That is that stings for anybody who is playing against. That stings for any offensive line. And then with the offensive move for Devontae, I was talking to Sam before the show, and position-wise for the Raiders, talking about number one wide receiver, slot receiver, and tight end, you have three guys in Devontae, Hunter, Renfrow, and Darren Waller, who Adams, people would probably argue, is the best wide receiver in the league. I'm not here to say whether he is or whether he isn't. If he's on our team, I'm going to call him that, but that's just biased. But, I mean, I think it's reasonable to say that he's either 1, 2, or 3. Right. Hunter Renfrow, in terms of slot, conservatively is top 5 as a slot wide receiver. I would say, who knows, but I'd say probably in there. And then Darren Waller is easily the third best tight end in the league, I think, behind Kelsey and Kittle. So Carr, for somebody who hasn't had a lot of weapons throughout his career, now has 3 guys who are top 5 in each of their position groups. So yeah, my dad pointed out the fact that there's a lot of pressure on Carr, and I agree with him. There is a lot of pressure on Carr, but I also think at the same time, I don't think everything can fall if it doesn't go well. I mean, if Carr has a horrible season and that's the reason why the Raiders don't do well, then okay, yes, that's his fault. But if Derek plays well and they only end up like 9-8 or 10-7, I don't know if I think in any other division.
How would that be possible if he plays well?
Well, I know, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, if the Raiders were in like any other AFC division, I think that they would have a real shot to win the division, minus the one that the Bills are in. But in this division, they might be the 4th best team. Like, legitimately, they might be the 4th best team. Carr's the 4th best quarterback. That's not saying Carr's a terrible quarterback. I think he's a top 10 quarterback. He certainly was last year. But they might be the 4th best team. And right now, I think conservatively, you'd say they're shooting for a wild card spot. which is crazy to think after finishing 10-7, but it's just the reality of the situation with their division. I was telling Sam, I think that these teams within the next 5 years, based on the way that they're acquiring talent, they're all thinking Super Bowl. I'm not saying that the Raiders are a Super Bowl team. I'm not saying that the Chargers or Broncos are at this moment right now either. What I'm saying is based on the way that all this movement is happening, they're all aiming for it right now, and they just all happen to be in the same division. So either one of two things is going to happen. Either they're all going to eat each other alive and nobody's going to win a Super Bowl, or whoever comes out of that division is going to be like ready for whatever happens, because they've gone up against three of the, who knows, maybe three of the best teams in the league, at least the three of the best teams in the AFC.
If you go 3-3 out of that division, you're ecstatic.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And I think expectations for the Raiders right now, look, I know getting Chandler is awesome, and I know getting Devontae is awesome, but we have to be realistic with the schedule and with the division. Like, I think we're shooting for a wild card spot, and then we take our chances in the playoffs. I really think that is the path for the Raiders. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because you can't guarantee a sweep against Denver anymore, and you can't guarantee a sweep against the Chargers. You were never going to sweep the Chiefs. I know you almost did it 2 years ago, but I think 3-3 at best is what you hope for. I agree with you in that division. And then you, in order to get a playoff spot and not a wild card spot, you have to split in the division. And then you probably have to win like almost every other game outside of the division, which is insane. But the Chiefs are going to have a great record. And I assume the other three teams are too. So that was a long rant about the Raiders, but those are sort of my thoughts sitting as a fan of the team.
I think all in all, we can agree that they definitely made major improvements on both sides of the ball, especially giving up only a first rounder and a second rounder for top
kind of feels
two,
like a steal,
maybe the best wide receiver in the NFL. It's going to take some time for them to gel a little bit. They haven't played with each other in years, and it's not going to be like the Rodgers Adams connection where they can just read each other's minds. But
certainly
he
not
is
off the first season, though.
He's such a good ball player in the air that you could just run things for him and he will go make a play for you. And Derek hasn't had that since a Walmart version of that in Michael Crabtree, where he was catching like every contested ball, or Amari Cooper when he was
Cooper when his first two seasons. Cooper in his first two seasons was nuts, and then he sort of just fell off a cliff. But his first two seasons would be probably the best route running and just pure receiver that he's had. And I guess Renfro's a guy who can make stuff happen for you. He's not going to go up and make contested catches, but you can throw it to him on 3rd and 10, and he can get you that 10 yards, even if there's 5 people in front of him.
But Devontae's so good, you can double cover him.
Way different,
Put a guy shadowing him, and you put safety help on the top, and if there's 5 yards separation between the safety and him, he's making that catch.
Dude, losing Zay Jones really hurts them. That stinks. Because that would have been. He went to the Jags, I believe. Which the Jags, by the way, have been in a huge spending spree as well.
They major overpaid for Christian Kirk. That doesn't make any sense.
They did. But with Waller being kind of a receiving tight end and Renfro being who he is, like, I don't know who the 4th receiver is going to be. But the Raiders went from a very average receiving core to a top-tier receiving core in the blink of an eye, because it's one of those things where teams were doubling Waller, and that was leaving Renfro kind of open, or you double Renfro, and then you – but now when you have Devontae, Renfro, and Waller, it's like, who are you going to double? Because you have Renfro, who just went for 1,000 yards, and Waller, who – I think has had like 100 catches like every season and has almost 1,000 yards every season as well. You pretty much have 3,000-yard wide receivers on your team. So who are you going to double? And the answer is probably Devontae. I think the smart thing to do would be to double Devontae, but then you have single coverage on Waller and Renfro, which is just going to work. Yeah, they're going to be hard to cover. They're really going to be tough to defend. Carr really does have a lot of pressure on him to make it work, but I feel like with the connection that he has with Waller already, the one that he clearly has with Renfro, and whatever connection he had with Devontae at Fresno State probably won't take too long for it to show itself. I imagine it's going to take a couple games, but I imagine it'll come pretty quickly.
Right. I mean, you gotta feel ecstatic for this. Are you gonna get a Devontae Adams jersey?
I very, very seldom get player jerseys, really. I've always been like a team memorabilia person. And the last time we signed a big name wide receiver, he froze his feet.
And didn't even make it to the preseason.
And didn't even make it to the preseason. So I'm gonna wait on the Devontae thing.
That'd be kind of vintage. That'd be kind of hard if you had a Raiders Antonio Brown jersey. A nice little 84 in black and silver.
Yeah.
That's kind of hard.
Oh man. Okay, so enough about the Raiders because we talked a lot about them.
We had to.
We definitely did. So for you, what was the next biggest WTF signing?
Honestly, that's a tough one. I think for sheer volume of the business side of it, the contract that Von Miller got, I was super surprised at. I didn't think he was going to garner that much money, 120 million. I didn't think he had another big deal like that in him because he was worth what, a second round pick when the Rams got him?
6-year, $120 million deal.
I don't think he's going to be putting up the kind of productivity 6 years from now. So I don't get that contract that he earned.
So he's making $20 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna look up. Keep. I'm gonna look up contracts.
This is very similar to the contract that he got after he won Super Bowl MVP for the Broncos, which was 4 or 5 years earlier when he's much younger and was arguably a more productive player. Yeah, he put up great numbers this year, but you have no idea with his age and his durability factor. You don't really know what kind of production you're going to get from outside of, he can stay healthy in the playoffs. And if the Bills are paying 120 million for 6 years for a guy that is going to show up in the playoffs, then more power to him. But that was a deal that I was really shocked at the length and sheer volume of. I thought he was going to go to Denver on kind of the cheap. And then the other one I was surprised at was Allen Robinson going to the Rams. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't think that that'd be a spot for him because they're getting Robert Woods back. They have Cooper Kupp, who's the best wide receiver in the league. They have Reynolds still. They have Higbee, and they're still linked to OBJ. There's still a lot of interest there where they want to bring him back. And you just go out and get Allen Robinson for, I think, a kind of a bargain deal, what they got him for. I thought he was worth a little more than that. But that was a deal that, for me, I didn't see the initial pairing right there, right off the bat.
So, okay, so I'm looking up contracts for some of the bigger defensive linemen in the league in terms of name value. So Von Miller was 6 years, 120 million, which would put him at $120 million a year. Who do you think the best defensive lineman? $20 million a year. My bad. Who would you consider the best defensive lineman in the league?
So are you talking edge rusher or just because it's either Aaron Donald
or edge rusher,
in the interior? Okay. Myles Garrett's definitely up there. I think both of the Bosa brothers right now are definitely better. I think I'd take Max Crosby over Von Miller right now.
I would too.
With sheer production that he gives you. I can't remember who else was the all-pro dudes, but just that list right there, I feel like, and I don't think any of them make that much money.
So, no, okay. So most of them make, at least on a per year basis, more.
Okay.
However, Aaron Donald, to put it into perspective, Von Miller signed 6 year, 120. Aaron Donald, I think we would say, is hands down better than Von Miller. However, and he also has a 6 year deal. This is one that's most comparable. He has a 6 year deal that's worth $135 million. So in terms of just sheer number, that's only $15 million more than Von Miller. And I know Von Miller is going to be a Hall of Famer, but
and he played really well last year. Like, no doubt, he played really well last year.
But we also can't ignore the fact that who he was on the defensive line with.
And he's not getting any younger. I think he's over 30.
32. He's 32. I looked it up. Khalil Mack has a 6-year contract as well. That's worth $141 million a year. Myles Garrett signed a contract that was 5 years, $125 million a year. And then TJ Watt had one that was 4 years, $112 million, which was a contract extension. So he's making that player type of money. And yet, I know he's great, but I wouldn't put him in the categories of any of those guys, even Max.
Yeah, I wouldn't. That sort of money makes me think that we're putting him in. We're almost expecting him to produce like a defensive player of the year candidate next year. If we're talking about TJ Watt, Khalil Mack, who I think could easily contend for a defensive player of the year next year if he gets the number of snaps that's needed. Myles Garrett's always going to be up there. I don't know why I forgot about TJ Watt. That's so dumb of me. But those guys, I mean, if you're comparing him value-wise, then it's almost like Buffalo's expecting that kind of production, which I don't think is fair to him. Mm-hmm. But good, I mean, awesome for Von Miller that he was able to get another big deal. The dude deserves it. He's first ballot Hall of Famer. It's just crazy to me that a 32-year-old edge rusher got a 6-year, $120 million deal.
So the Von Miller thing, yes, from a financial standpoint, was crazy to me. I think the two things, at least the thing looking at the picture of the four of them, to me, for the Chargers to have a defense that has Joey Bosa, J.C. Jackson, Khalil Mack, and Derwin James is freaking ridiculous. That is unbelievable that is, and that's on two different levels of the defense. That is your secondary almost taken care of, and that's your defensive line almost taken care of.
Who do you block?
I don't know. And who do you throw against? I'm going to avoid Jackson. Crap, there's James. I don't.
Derwin James balled out last year. He showed
he's a monster.
Everyone that I think he had back-to-back ACL years, ACL shortened years, but he looked phenomenal last year.
That was crazy.
They're not blowing any more leads in LA. They're not doing that anymore. They're done with that stuff. They're not letting it come down to a field goal anymore.
If the Raiders got swept in their division, I don't even think I could sit there and be mad. Like, I look at all three of these. I look at the three. Now, okay, let me back up. I think at this point, the Chargers are probably the second best team in that division. Mm-hmm. Just because we don't know exactly what Russ is going to be like in Denver. We're assuming it's going to work. I still think the Raiders' best chance at getting wins in that division is against Denver.
Yeah.
Splitting with them, and they seem to always split with the Chargers. It's so weird. But that just got a whole hell of a lot harder. And the Chargers keeping Mike Williams now, that was huge as well. To keep that offense intact and to have, I mean, Justin Herbert now is allowed to have an okay game because you'd think that the defense could just go, we got you.
Yeah,
you need the ball back? Hang on.
I don't think they lost anyone on offense.
Not as far as I
can tell. They still have Eckler. They still have Keenan Allen. They retained Mike Williams. They obviously have Herbert, who can still keep getting better and better in this league. Oh man, when I saw that Khalil Mack deal, I initially thought that's all Chicago wanted for him. Why weren't the Niners in that? Why weren't the Raiders in that to try to get him back? Why weren't any team? I think he has more value than Von Miller did last year.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he was playing as a better player, and he's still got, I think, a little more left than Von Miller does.
I'm glad he got out of Chicago too, because they weren't gonna do anything of value. So I mean, good for a really good player to be on a really good team. But God, the Chargers, man, like, and then on the top of that, Randy Gregory goes to Denver. The defensive line of the Raiders, Chargers, and the Broncos is insane.
Well, the Chiefs aren't
and they're
that
not
bad
bad either. No.
I don't know if they re-signed Melvin Ingram, but he actually played all right for them, and they got Jones and Clark still. I'm pretty sure. I haven't seen. That's the one team that's kind of tough to just assume that they're going to be the best in the division because they've only lost players. They haven't really made any big moves. They signed that corner or that safety to replace Tyrann Mathieu, and they're going to just let him walk. But they really need to retool that defense, especially for Devontae Adams to come into the league and Russell Wilson to come into that division. Like they really need to focus on that defense.
Yeah, and then I'm just gonna want to try to hit them all. Allen Robinson to the Rams. You have two number one wide receivers on your team now, on both sides of the field. Technically three, if OBJ is able to get back and get healthy, and
you're forgetting about Woods.
And Woods, yeah, yeah.
Which Robert Woods could be. Robert Woods could be a number one wide receiver on him.
Right. I thought you were alluding to OBJ, but I guess Robert Woods would be more realistic to get back healthy sooner.
If I'm the Niners, I'm moving heaven and earth to go get OBJ and try to bring him to San Francisco.
Well, you just hope he stays healthy or hope he gets back. That's the one thing you'd be risking. But is that the best? If Robert Woods is healthy, that's hands down the best wide receiving core in the league.
Probably of all time.
I mean, Tim Brown and Jerry Rice were once on the same team.
That was an older Jerry Rice.
It was an older Jerry Rice. Name value, I'm guessing name value it would probably be those two. But
Holt and Bruce for the Rams, two Hall of Famers. What were the two Colts dudes? Marvin Harrison, and not Pierre Thomas. What was his name? Not Pierre Garcon. I mean,
dude, who was it?
Well, he was the better one too, or at least he stayed in Indy a little longer.
Dude, we look so bad.
No, we don't.
Reggie Wayne, right? Or Marvin Harrison?
Reggie Wayne.
Yeah, it was Reggie Wayne. That's right. He was so good.
They're both so good.
They were. But in terms of a trio, I mean, that's Cooper Kupp, who just had the best wide receivers, season 4 wide receiver. Let's just invert it of all time. Allen Robinson, who's the number one wide receiver on probably any team, except the one that he signed for. And then Robert Woods, who could be a number one wide receiver by himself.
And then if they get OBJ is the odd man out.
God, if they sign him, if they're able to keep him, that would be unbelievable.
They're repeating.
And then Mitch Trubisky to the Steelers, I thought was awesome. I loved that.
Oh, you just cut out a lot for me.
Sorry. I loved the Mitch Trubisky signing to Pittsburgh. I think that's great for him, and he goes to a very stable organization with a great running back and a lot of weapons around him. Potentially the best head coach in the league, and has a very good opportunity to do what he was doing when the Bears were actually running an offense catered to his skill set. Because here's the thing. Pittsburgh doesn't have to make it a Mitch Trubisky-centered offense. It can be a very 50-50 Najee Harris, Mitch Trubisky offense, and they can win that way. They've done it before when Roethlisberger was there sort of at the very beginning of his career. And they can do it again with Mitch. I mean, he doesn't have to be a top 10 QB, but he was the number 2 pick in the NFL draft at one point or another. And when he was actually playing well, that season that he had with Chicago when they were really good, he was like an MVP candidate. And if they do anything similar to that, then it could work really well in Pittsburgh.
I mean, I think it's really good for him that he's getting this opportunity to start again. I don't think it's going to end well for them. Um, I just think what we saw the best of Mitch Trubisky was an offense with a lot of training wheels on it. Like it was a very it almost coddled him almost to where it was giving him wide open throws and passes, and it was like I think smoke and mirrors is such a good way to describe what that offense was, and really inflated his numbers.
Okay, so I think we've pretty much hit on most of them. I know there were some players who got released, like Julio Jones got released. I think Fletcher Cox got cut. So there were. Oh, here you go. Just popped up on my feed. Oh, that looks so good. Everybody looks better in silver and black. So I know there were some releases, but in terms of where people landed, those were the big ones, and that was. It seemed like, I mean, I know we talk about it every year with the NFL offseason, sort of becoming more and more like the NBA with the amount of movement there is and stuff. But I mean, the amount of big names that moved this offseason, it felt like some of the most we've had in recent memory.
Yeah, this offseason scene with all the quarterback movement and it's going to be interesting to see where Julio now ends up, but like big name players are switching teams and switching conferences, and it's really exciting. This coupled with the MLB offseason and all the moves that are happening there too, it's almost like casting a huge shadow over the NBA regular season. Like I just want to see more news about the MLB and NFL from an off the field, off the diamond standpoint than what's on the court.
So I want to talk about the NBA, and I had something that I wanted to sort of workshop with you kind of live on the show to see if it was something that you liked. Oh, hang on. To close out the NFL talk, I just remembered something that I definitely had to get in here. So I apologize for it being so abrupt. It left my mind until now. Are you aware of the rule changes that have been proposed for overtime? So the big one that got proposed, and this was the one that I wanted to center around. I wanted to get your opinion on it. I think it was the Titans who sent this proposal. It was an overtime rule change proposal that said if a team scores a touchdown, then either one of two things happens. If they kick the field goal, then the other team gets the ball back. If they score a 2-point conversion, the game is over. And that was the rule proposal. And sitting there listening to it, because I heard them talking about it today and I read it earlier in the week, I really liked that idea. Because what it does is, one, there's strategy that goes into whether or not you kick the field goal or not. Because if you kick the field goal and you miss, I mean, now all the other team has to do is go down and score a touchdown and kick field goal, and they win. But same thing if you go for a 2-point conversion. If you miss, then same thing, that's going to end up winning the game. But you have that added risk of we can end it on a 2-point conversion. I liked that rule proposal a lot. What do you think of said rule change?
I think that just prolongs this narrative that everyone wants to see both teams touch the ball in overtime. Because I feel like all we need is a playoff game to where a team drives down the opening possession, scores a touchdown, scores a 2-point conversion. Everyone's sitting there with their hands up like, oh, we don't get to see Josh Allen go on the field. We don't get to see Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, all these talented quarterbacks go out. It's just going to be the same narrative, I feel like. Yes, it takes a lot more. I think it takes a little bit more skill, a lot more risk leading into it. And it's definitely a higher difficulty level. But I think you're still going to get the same narrative from a lot of people.
So would you then be in favor or against the rule change, another rule change proposal that got sent, which was just both teams are required to touch the ball?
Like I like a full quarter or like the NBA overtime rule where they just play a shorter quarter. I don't know why. I guess I do know why, because the NFL doesn't want to like increase more snaps on bodies, so like more risk of injury, I guess, for guys and players. So I guess that's a downside of it, but I think that's the most fair that they could do, really.
Um, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I'm in the favor. I'm in the camp that both teams. I initially, you're right. After the Bills and Chiefs game, I was a part of that group that was sitting there going, "This sucks that Josh Allen didn't get a chance to touch the ball. That's horrible." But you have it work the opposite way with the Bengals, who pick off Patrick Mahomes and then go kick a field goal. Game over. And defense did win the game there. So I'm in favor of the 2-point conversion rule with the Titans because I think you'll have a greater opportunity for teams to get the ball. However, it's not a guarantee. And I like the little wrinkle that it adds. So that was wanted to get that in there because that was something big that got proposed in the NFL. So, okay. So with the NBA, one of the conversations that I heard earlier in the week, and honestly, I've heard throughout the season, is really the idea of how the NBA season is so it's been devalued almost. Like it feels like the regular season for a lot of players and for fans like just isn't as important as the regular season. I mean, as the playoffs. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's with any sport.
Right. So the one sport that, and same thing with baseball. I mean, baseball has what, 162 games? That's a lot of baseball. And I know a lot of people have been clamoring to shorten the baseball season to make each game more meaningful, which is something that the NFL has with all of their games. They only have 16. There's a scarcity of games, and
17.
it makes 17. Sorry. God, that's right. There's such a scarcity of games that it makes each one feel so much more impactful because one loss here or there really does determine where you're going to end up. The NBA has 82 games. That's a lot of basketball games. And I know for me personally, I mean, how much of the Kings have you been watching this year?
What was that?
How much of the Kings have you been watching this year?
Well, they suck though.
I know they suck, but like legitimately.
A third of their games are probably.
How much NBA have you been watching regularly?
Barely, if any.
Right, not a lot. And I check in enough to make sure that I can speak intelligently about the NBA when I need to. And I listen to podcasts about the NBA just to keep myself informed. But the one thing that I really do think, and I think we all agree, that the NBA does need to change is figuring out a way to incentivize the regular season. You have so many players who sit out during a lot of these games. I know a lot of players have complained about, the back-to-backs, and so you don't want to play back-to-backs because you want to save your players for the playoffs, and there's just too many. So I was sitting here and I was like, I'm going to fix the NBA. I'm going to figure out a way to fix the NBA schedule. So I had an idea. I want to run it by you. Here's my proposal. And this would shorten the NBA by about 30 games. But I think it's worth at least discussing. And you can tell me if it's a stupid idea or not. But and there is one room for improvement if you want to make it a little bit longer, but I'll address that in a second. So let's talk about this Kings specifically because that is our team. So they play in the West and they're the Pacific Division. There are 30. So for anybody who doesn't, there are 30 teams in the NBA, 3 divisions in the East and 3 divisions in the West. So each division is comprised of 5 teams. So we'll talk about the Kings. You play everybody in your division 4 times, which is what happens now, I believe. So you keep that. So that would be 16 games. between divisional opponents. Then we move out to the West. That'd be 10 more teams. You play each of those teams twice. You get one home court game and one away game, which would mean that would amount to 20 games. And then every year with the Eastern Conference, you only play them one time a year, and each year you alternate on who gets the home and who gets the away game, which would mean you play every team in the East once, either home or away, and then the next year that flips. So that way over time there's no like competitive disadvantage in the long run, which would mean there'd only be 15 games from that. So what you'd get is you'd get 16 plus 20 plus 15, which would equal to 51 NBA games. Now, if you think that's not enough, then what you could do is you could add a second game against all of the Eastern Conference teams, which would bring that up to what, 66? But again, I think 51 is a good number. I like the format that I sort of laid out. I think what it does is, one, you eliminate 31 games, so you get that scarcity of product. And what you could also do is for all those players who don't like playing on back-to-backs, you open up the entire NBA season for not having those back-to-backs. So that problem is now no, maybe you have, one every once in a while. But the amount of back-to-backs that you have, or like late games, early morning flights and stuff like that, all that stuff that you have with the scheduling, I feel like you can definitely spread out over the season, and then you effectively eliminate those problems. So you eliminate the amount of games that you have to play on the players, and then you also give a scarcity of product for the league, which I feel like would incentivize each of the games. So what do you think of the 51 game NBA proposal?
I'd be interested if they tried it. I don't think it's applicable to the real world just because of 31 potential earnings that these owners will miss out on. Which I think is a huge thing that I don't think you could really sell to these owners, especially if you're arguing sustainability of the league. I mean, that's tough to justify that much left off the bottom line. Also, what did I have? Oh, I think I think it'd be really interesting too, because I think it would improve the play. You would have more time for players and teams to practice, more time spent with each other to really create a culture and a cohesion, really. The road trips, I feel like, would be a little longer with the amount of time in between each game as well. But I think it'd be awesome on players' bodies. There'd be no excuse. Nothing you could say about rest. There's nothing you could say about that. I think it's tough because I think small market teams, especially if you're an Eastern Conference, say like you're an Orlando Magic, you need those games against the Lakers, Clippers. What's another big one? Dallas, Golden State's a huge one. You need those huge market games on your schedule because those really drive fans to your stadium. And say we're giving that away for a year. Like you're just missing out on that for an entire year. You can lose all those fans and all that revenue generated from that one game. And it's maybe not that big of a deal, but I think it's just something that's monetarily something that would have to be really talked about and really justified.
So let's assume that all of the money gets worked out, just the schedule. Are you a go for it or are you against it?
Yeah, I'll greenlight it. I'll call Adam Silver and see what he says, but I don't know what's gonna happen.
So here's what I'm gonna try to do. Just as a fun fanboy, I'm going to send a video of that proposal to any ESPN person that I have that I know has a social media following, and over the next couple months, I'll see if they answer. I'll make that promise to everybody here. Whether I'm not saying it's going to get on the air or not, but I would like to get somebody else's opinion on it, and if I can send it to maybe a producer or maybe somebody who because I've had like fitness trainers who I love who have a massive following send me videos back on questions that I had about that industry. So like I've communicated with some of my favorite trainers. I just did actually the other day with with my favorite trainer ever. He answered me back. So it's not impossible. I'll send it to anybody who I can find and see if I can get something. Um, we'll see. I don't know. Yeah, all it takes is one person to answer me back. I'll send it to like a bunch and see if it happens. But that was my proposal, and I feel like it takes care of a lot of problems. I understand that the TV deal is, I mean, it's just the money that the owners would lose, and you are losing so many games throughout the season. So I know that that's a lot of money down the drain. But if the financials got worked out, that's more of what I've been interested in and hearing is that if the money did get worked out, is that a decent proposal? So I'll do my best to send that to people who I think might see it. And then I'll get back to everybody on the show. So, all right. In terms of the NBA season as a whole, I mean, we're getting to the home stretch. Right now, your standings. Let me pull that up real quick. I had the division standings, not the league. So right now, I'm just reading off the three best records in the league right now. All are in the West. You have Phoenix sitting at top right now, at 56-14. Memphis and then Golden State fall just a little bit behind them. Draymond Green came back, so that'll be huge for Golden State. I don't know what the hell happened to the Lakers, but I mean they have fallen off a cliff. I saw a stat about the Lakers. This was 12 hours ago. That says for the first time since LeBron's rookie season, this is the first time since LeBron's rookie season that his team is 11 games under 500. The Lakers are bad. The Lakers are really bad. And I mean, what do you think is going to happen to LeBron after this season?
I could see him moving on. I could also see him being pretty content with his life in LA and trying to stay and really just kind of telling himself that they can retool. I mean, he's playing some of the best basketball he's played in a long time in his age 37 year, and there's no reason to think that he can't do that again next year because his skills aren't deteriorating. It's just if his body's going to fail him or not. So I could see him really trying to say, hey, we can package Anthony Davis and try to move him for something and give away Russell Westbrook. We'll take on any massive contract that entails, but really try to retool and hope that Bronny makes it to the NBA pretty quickly.
Yeah. Our NBA coverage, and more specifically, and is going to get more specific as sort of the playoffs start to eke in. We'll do a lot of matchup previews. We're going to try to get our buddy Josh on the show, who is like probably as connected to the NBA as anybody that I know. You guys, we've had him on before. You know his YouTube channel. If you don't know his YouTube channel, just type in Josh Carson, JC3 on YouTube, and you'll find him. He's got a pretty big following now. He's worked really hard, and he deserves every bit of that. So we're going to try to get him back on the show. And then baseball is also going to be a hot topic on the show. I told Sam last season that I wanted to get more plugged in to baseball just so we could have some more topics to talk about on the show, because a lot of the time it is just football, basketball, and also closet tennis show as well. So baseball's coming back, so that'll be huge. We'll have more topics to talk about on the show going forward. Yeah, it's pretty much all I had slated, unless you had a pocket segment that you wanted to throw out there. Anything about the Last Kingdom?
I'm gonna need you to pinch yourself because you're not wearing green.
Oh yeah, here I have a folder on my desk that's green.
That doesn't count.
All right. Well, my middle name's Patrick. Does that count?
That doesn't count.
Inundated. Right here. Pinch. There you go.
That's what we didn't really address this in the beginning? We just kind of let it happen.
I felt like it was pretty self-explanatory.
It's permanent.
Permanent? It's a tattoo? Nice.
Yeah. I said I'd never get a tattoo, but then I just went 0 to 100 and got a face tattoo.
I might be getting one tomorrow right here. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
So this is what it looks like now, and we'll see if that changes tomorrow. I still haven't seen the final draft yet. So he's either going to send it to me tonight or tomorrow morning. So we'll see.
Well, I hope it's good.
Me too. Me too. Me too. All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching or listening to episode 124 of Nothing to Say the Fans podcast. We really do appreciate it. A lot to cover, and we will. Well, I mean, we did the best we could, but we'll be back next week with a lot more information and, a lot more laughs, hopefully. So hope you all have a safe weekend, and we will see you all very soon.